the numerical disparity, as you can see, is kind of coming down. So what he wants is Joubert's division to move ahead and take some of the heights just in front of Rivoli, like a bit near the San Marco and everything. So they hold the edge of the plateau. So this is quite a very early morning assault when Joubert's men start moving towards the chapels at the edge of the plateau, and within no time you have a lot of fighting right around 5 a.m. on a cold January morning. And unfortunately for Napoleon's, I think just due to the momentum and everything and the heat of battle, the Austrians wake up quite quickly and react. And he had just hoped to quickly just take it and consolidate. And unfortunately for him, what has happened is it's now become a full-on mass attack. The frontal columns are now forming up to, attack his main force. So now these guys are going to have been fighting for over 4-5 hours before Massena's troops start to arrive. And just prior to this, some of Joubert's divisions actually started to break. The one division did valiantly hold its ground, which is the 14th Demi Brigade. And every time they would lose their cannons, their officers would demand, like, are you going to let the enemy take this? You're not going to do that. And they just charge back. But ultimately, they do hold off long enough for Massena to come, and he takes position on the left of Joubert's line. So now the French line has stabilized, the Austrians cannot outflank. And now, unfortunately for Napoleon, the 6th column has now arrived. They're on the far side, and they pour flanking cannon fire on Napoleon's east flank defenses, against the valley that leads up to Rivoli. So that causes the entire force there to rout, since unfortunately moving artillery and using artillery to outflank was, I think, only something that Gustavus Adolphus did very well. So they start to retreat, and the Austrians are starting to pour in. And some of Joubert's division units see this, and they start withdrawing. The panic factor. And at the same time, Napoleon's forces are also quite exhausted themselves. They've been fighting for hours, or if you're Massena's men, you've just been marching for a few hours to get to the battle, and then immediately tossed in. And then he hears gunfire from the south, which is the 1st Austrian column, has now finally, reached the southern tip of the Rivoli Plateau and are poised to completely cut off Napoleon. If this went out, you're going to have a situation where Napoleon's entire army is just encircled by the Austrians with no supplies or way out. That would have been defeat. And then, at this time, he is showing his amazing ability to stay calm. Because just think about it. You're pressed on all fronts. Your forces are pretty much, at this point, I think around 90% of all available French troops are committed to battle on one of the various fronts.
Yeah, that's scary.
Your enemies are also heavily committed, but they outnumber you. Your men are tired and you're cut off. What do you do? And on top of that, one of the positions is just pouring flanking fire onto you. Most generals would be on the capitulation front. And it was said like Napoleon he just calmly assesses the entire situation, and he's just like, yep, they are ours. That supreme self-confidence that he just shows is, I have to admit, it's just one of the most admirable characteristics I have in this man. He had an ego, but he sure as hell could keep calm, analyze, and he backed his ego up. So he realizes that the column coming up the valley is the main immediate threat, and he needs to focus. So whatever free guns he has and whatever units Joubert can spare, which is just going to be a few hundred men, he needs them to come and hold off the advance. And while they do this, his cannons, they manage to hit um, a 15 battery gun. They start pouring in canister and grape shot against the advancing Austrians. Now, the problem is they are coming through a valley. You have a narrow front. This is mowing down the Austrian front lines, and that's heavily demoralizing them.
I literally just realized, maybe do you just want to explain to the audience the difference between a regular artillery and the grape shot?
Yeah. So the most common shot that you would see at this era of warfare was called the round shot, which, as its name implies, is just a round cannonball of a certain weight that's fired. And it's quite good for, mowing down people in a straight line. So it has more penetrative power, but it cannot attack on a broader front. So any dense formation like a column, it's quite vulnerable to a round shot, because if you have a properly placed round shot, just imagine it like going through the column of men like, a bowling ball going and mowing down skittles. I think that's the only explanation I can think of.
That's pretty good, yeah.
But which is actually one of the reasons why you actually see the line formations being used, because because this is the most common type of shot. So to counter it, the line formation actually limits the casualties from them, because you might just lose like maybe 6, 7 men, but better to lose 6, 7 men than 40, 50. So that is the round shot. However, canister grape shot is just like, small casing filled with pellets. So you could just think of it like a cannonball shotgun
A
with
cannonball
the lack
shotgun
of
is
a better.
perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So it does not have like the deep penetrative power as a round shot, but at close range, it's going to mow down the front line. So this is, for example, Craig, as you alluded in, when Napoleon saved the Directory in the coup before he got command of the army of Italy. That is the famous whip of grape shot. That is also another term for canister shot. This is what he would use here, and it's psychologically and physically pretty harrowing for the front lines. Now, natural shortcoming is it's very short. It's short range. I think another great example, which was in the future, was at the Battle of Eylau, where the French, uh, I think it was the 7th or 8th Corps under Marshal Augereau, they were advancing against the Russians and got completely lost in a blizzard. And when the blizzard cleared, that entire corps was right in front of the Russian main batteries. And they had already been loaded up with canister shot and fired at 100 meters or so into the corps.
Yeah, that would have
The
been
entire
carnage.
corps was brutalized. I wouldn't even say decimated, brutalized. It just pulled out. Took months to recover. So I think that's why that was a devastating effect that Napoleon and this cannon had in the battle. And at one point, uh, an enemy ammo wagon just blew up, hit by a lucky shot. But that psychologically terrified the Austrians. And now there's a mayhem, right? So first of all, just you have a valley. So you have men coming in from the back, trying to push forward as they try to come in and exit onto the Rivoli plateau. But the French cannons have inflicted a heavy toll on the Austrian front lines, and these guys are trying to retreat. And onto this, Napoleon launches his cavalry. Now, cavalry is never good against an organized mass of infantry. However, well, they're not. They're not at all close to cavalry, like organized. And Napoleon just has a few hundred horsemen. I think At the most, he had, yeah, I just did a quick check.